Madeleine Dean. The room went silent the moment she spoke, because everyone knew she wasn't just talking to her colleagues. She was talking to the entire country, and calling out years of failure that left countless Epstein victims forgotten, dismissed, and buried under excuses. And what she revealed next made even some members of Congress shift uncomfortably in their seats. Because for the first time in a long time, someone said out loud what millions have been whispering. The truth didn't disappear by accident. Someone let it vanish. She started by thanking her colleagues, steady and composed, but within seconds her tone changed. Not angry, hurt.
I thank the gentlewoman for yielding. I thank you for your comments. I associate myself with your comments. And to the gentlewomen from Florida, thank you for your work on this for years. And thank you for just correcting a piece of the record. There's so much more to it than that. Mr. Chairman, I understand that you are upset that this lays upon our table. I wish it didn't. I wish people long ago. I would ask you to allow me to complete my statement. I think the gentlewoman a moment ago spoke to that nonsense. This lays at our table now. The victims were here today. I wish they didn't have to be here. But for you to suggest that we were somehow using them, these women came forward. Some have come forward in the past, some with the courage and the pain on their faces. It's so disrespectful that someone would say, well, doggone it, you didn't deal with it. People have tried to deal with it for a long time. I wish the Department of Justice had dealt with it. I wish Florida had dealt with it. I wish he had not been given that sweetheart deal. And I wish that the names had not been covered up of who participated. Remember, the Attorney General, she had the list on her desk, and then it evaporated. It is known who is in that list. This Department of Justice knows who's in that list. Mr. Trump knows a lot about what happened in this. Somebody's trying to cover it up. 33,000 pages that were released, we all know, are a drop in the bucket compared to what actually is known and has been investigated when there's 1,000 victims. It's not just 2 people who were culpable. We show no other predators. There's no other names being revealed. There's a lot of people who know an awful lot. There was tremendous depth of investigation. But I want to end with this. This is entirely about the victims. And you re-victimize them when you say, well, you didn't do enough and you didn't do enough. And why didn't you do something that year? It's on us. It is on us to do something about it. We are Congress. And I suggested to you, she said, survivors will do it for survivors. Let's stand with the survivors. Let's not leave it on them. Let's not say, okay, DOJ failed, this administration failed, Congress failed. Why would we want to be in these jobs if we don't seek justice for victims so grievously harmed? Think if this was your daughter. I have 4 granddaughters. Think if it was one of yours. Would you be content saying, you know what? They didn't do enough 4 years ago, so I don't really care about this. This is entirely about the victims, and they have been lost here. I don't know why you sit contentedly allowing them to be lost. I ask for support for my amendment. I yield back to the gentlelady with great thanks.
Exhausted. Done with the political theater that always seems to erupt whenever the Epstein case comes up. And then she pointed to the one thing no one in that room wanted to confront. The victims were sitting right there, listening, watching, reliving. And instead of unity, they were hearing accusations that lawmakers were using them, that their suffering was a prop. And that lit a fire in her voice, because nothing could be further from the truth. She reminded everyone that some of these survivors have spent decades trying to be heard. Decades. That some came forward before anyone else dared. Some broke down barriers, spoke publicly, put their faces and names out there even when their families begged them not to. And to suggest that they were being used? It wasn't just disrespectful, it was cruel. She said their courage was written across their faces. And she was right. If you watched the hearing closely, you saw women holding back tears, shaking, gripping each other's hands. Not for drama, for survival. But then she said something that hit even harder. This lays at our table now. meaning Congress, meaning the people with power who chose silence for too long. She didn't blame the victims. She didn't even blame the general public. She blamed the people in that very room, including herself. And she admitted she wished this wasn't the moment they were facing. She wished others, departments, states, legal systems, had stepped up long before this, because here's the truth she forced into the open. Many opportunities to get justice were missed. Not accidentally, knowingly. She spoke about the original sweetheart deal. A decision that stunned legal experts then and still baffles people today. A deal so soft that even years later, lawyers speculate there had to be more to the story. Pressure, influence, whispered conversations behind closed doors. Nothing proven, but plenty of questions that never got honest answers. And as she spoke, the room grew heavier. Because everyone knew exactly what she meant, but none of them wanted to be the one to say it first. Then came the moment that froze the room. She described how a list containing individuals who allegedly participated in the wrongdoing, once sat on a desk, and then evaporated. Her word, evaporated, as if vital evidence just dissolved into thin air. She didn't embellish. She didn't dramatize. She stated it plainly, almost coldly, and that somehow made it worse. Because if something that important can simply disappear, what else has vanished? She followed it with a chilling reminder. It is known who is in that list. Not guessed. Not rumored. Known. And based on her comments, officials still have access to the names. Departments still know exactly who was involved. Yet the public remains in the dark. The victims remain waiting. And Congress remains fighting each other instead of fighting for the truth. That's why this speech hit so hard. It stripped away the excuses. But she wasn't finished. She turned her attention to the documents. 33,000 pages were released. Sounds like a lot, right? She shut that down instantly. She called it a drop in the bucket. Because anyone who understands the scale of this case knows that number doesn't match the depth of the investigation. Reports claim thousands of interviews took place, hundreds of leads were documented, and dozens of agencies had their hands on different pieces of the puzzle. But only a fraction of that ever reached Congress or the public. And she highlighted the most disturbing detail of all. When you have possibly 1,000 victims, how do you end up with almost no additional names of perpetrators? How does a case of this size and scope magically shrink to only 2 publicly blamed individuals? That's not an investigation. That's a narrative. That's a filter. Or worse, someone protecting someone. She didn't say who. She didn't have to. Every person in that room had their own theory. Some look at the legal system. Some look at past leaders. Some look at departments or courts. Others point to the vast network of wealthy individuals who allegedly had ties to Epstein, bankers, celebrities, businessmen, political figures, even royalty. Nothing proven. But speculation has swirled for years because transparency has never been complete. And as she spoke, she made one thing clear. Secrecy fuels speculation far more than truth ever will. As she continued, her voice carried a frustration that clearly came from years of watching the same pattern repeat. Committees investigate. Departments stonewall. Victims testify. Lawmakers argue. And then everything resets. Nothing changes. She challenged that cycle head-on. She said it is not acceptable to sit comfortably and shrug because someone else didn't act 4 years ago. Or 8. Or 10. She said bluntly. It's on us. On Congress. On elected officials. On people whose job is literally justice. But her closing was the part no one expected. She stepped away from politics entirely. From documents. From departments. From procedures. And spoke from a place of raw humanity. She looked around the room and said, "Think if this was your daughter." And you could almost feel the air leave the chamber. Because suddenly this wasn't about data or motions or amendments. It was about real people, children who grew up believing nobody cared enough to protect them. She revealed she has 4 granddaughters. And she asked her colleagues to imagine one of theirs in the same position. It wasn't a rhetorical trick. It was a plea. A simple truth. Empathy shouldn't require personal experience. But sometimes imagining your own child in harm's way is the only way to shatter political apathy. She accused the committee of allowing victims to be lost, silenced in a sea of debates and procedural games. She said she didn't understand how anyone could sit contentedly while survivors were ignored again. Her voice cracked, not with weakness but with conviction. The kind that only comes when someone has finally reached their breaking point. By the time she yielded her time, the shock wasn't from what she exposed, but from what she refused to ignore. She reminded everyone that justice doesn't happen by accident. Someone has to fight for it. Someone has to refuse to look away. Someone has to call out the failures, not just of agencies or past decisions, but of the very institutions responsible for accountability. And that's why this speech has rippled far beyond the hearing room, because it challenges all of us to ask one question. If transparency threatens powerful people, why were those people allowed near vulnerable individuals in the first place? And if the truth makes institutions uncomfortable, what does that say about those institutions? Her message wasn't subtle. This story isn't over. The documents aren't complete. The investigations aren't finished. The survivors aren't done speaking. And the public isn't done asking questions. What she delivered wasn't a speech. It was a warning. A turning point. A demand that Congress either confront the full truth or admit they were never serious about justice to begin with. And whether they like it or not, the world is watching. If you want to stay updated as more hearings unfold, more files are pushed forward, and more lawmakers step into the fight, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. There's so much more coming because this chapter is nowhere near the end.